Morning light breaks through a thin curtain in a tiny Jewish kitchen in Lystra. Warm dust dances in the beams of sun. Steam curls off a fresh loaf of bread. Flour coats the table, and a worn scroll rests right beside the bowl. This is not a throne room. This is not a temple. This is not a place history pays attention to. But this is where God planted a quiet revolution. Her name is Eunice, a Jewish woman, a believer in the scriptures, married into a Greek world that did not share her devotion. She can't change her husband. She can't change the culture. She can't change Rome. But she can plant something. So with flour on her hands and a scroll in her fingers, she speaks truth to her little boy, one verse at a time, one morning at a time. She is not famous. No prophet thunders here. No crowds listen. Only one child sits at her feet, swinging his little sandals. Timothy. He will grow into a pastor, a church planter, a spiritual son of Paul. And 2 millennia later, the world still reads the letters written to him, because one quiet mother believed that the word would take root. This is the revolution. Faith passed on, in a kitchen planting the word in one child, and God made that seed shake nations. Step outside that kitchen, and the city of Lystra roars with a different kind of power. Roman inscriptions carved into stone, Greek ideas traded like currency, merchants arguing over spices and fabrics, and the price of olive oil. This world does not worship the God of Abraham. This world bows to idols carved in marble. And yet, in this noise, Eunice plants quietly. She walks this street, touching both worlds. Hebrew markets behind her, Greek philosophy in front of her, and her son Timothy grows up between colliding cultures. Everyone around him believes strength is in empire, and fame, and philosophy. But Eunice believes strength is in Scripture. She trusts that if she hides the word in her son's heart long enough, Rome will not shape him. God will. This is the quiet revolution. Raising one child who knows the way in a world that doesn't. Watch Eunice step to her doorway. The wooden door behind her is weathered by years, but it opens to welcome both worlds. Shalom, says her Hebrew neighbor. Keri, says her Greek one. 2 greetings, 2 cultures, 2 languages, and Eunice loves them both. She is not loud. She is not political. She is not fighting Rome with swords or speeches. She is planting a quiet revolution with kindness, with hospitality, with scripture. Lived out, Israel's God, not shoved, but shown. She shakes a hand, smiles with softness, and answers every greeting with peace. She knows her home stands between pagan thought and ancient covenant faith, and she knows her son sees every interaction. Timothy watches how his mother treats the Greek neighbor with honor. He watches how she answers the Hebrew neighbor with grace. He learns that truth and love do not cancel each other. He learns that conviction does not require cruelty. He learns that Scripture can be strong and gentle without compromise. This doorway becomes a classroom. This small house becomes a training ground. And the seeds she plants here with words and warmth and wisdom will one day bear fruit in every city Timothy will touch. Because the quiet revolution of God does not always begin in a synagogue. Sometimes it begins at a front door with a gentle woman who chooses love and plants the word in one soul. Back inside the kitchen, the oil lamp flickers and sunlight streams through the small window, mixing light that looks almost like gold. Eunice kneads dough in her wine-colored dress, her hands steady. patient, and sure. Timothy sits near her in his soft cream shirt, etching letters into a wax tablet. Hebrew letters, truth letters. Lois, the grandmother, sits close to the lamp, her purple headscarf glowing in the warm flame. She speaks scripture like breathing. This is not noise. This is not spectacle. This is formation. This is theology done in the kitchen. This is the word being planted in real time, from an old voice into a young mind. Timothy looks up from his tablet and meets his mother's eyes. He sees no fear. He sees no frustration. He sees no bitterness toward the world outside. He sees peace. He sees conviction that doesn't crumble. He sees a woman who believes that God builds nations in secret places. He sees a grandmother who refuses to let culture write the story of their family. Every knead of dough, every sentence spoken by Lois, every letter Timothy carves, is a seed, and the revolution God is planting is not happening in the streets, but at this table, not in the courts of Rome, but in a kitchen under an oil lamp. This is how God overturns empires. He begins in small houses, with mothers and grandmothers who plant scripture into children. One letter at a time, one meal at a time, one generation at a time. And from this small, quiet kitchen in Lystra, God is preparing a voice that will preach the gospel to the ends of the earth. Step outside again, and the street of Lystra is loud with arguments, debates in Greek outside the synagogue, hands pointing, voices rising. A Roman patrol marches by, armor clanking, boots hitting cobblestone like thunder. Power here looks like force, like argument, like control. But step back inside Eunice's home, and power looks very different. Here, the bread sits on the table. The clay jug waits beside it, quiet, steady. Lois Johnson smiles gently at Timothy. Eunice Johnson holds her son's hand, and they speak truth with calm, not combat. Because Eunice knows the battle is not fought in the street. The battle is fought in the heart. She is not trying to outshout the Greeks. She is not trying to outmuscle Rome. She is shaping a soul. Timothy lifts his eyes not at the commotion outside, but at his mother. And this is where the revolution is planted. A child who watches his family choose scripture over noise, faith over fear, peace over panic. Rome thinks it owns the world. The philosophers think they shape minds, but history will tell a different story. The world will be changed not by the men shouting on this street, but by the boy growing quietly in this house. Because God still builds nations from steady homes, where the word is planted again and again in love. One dusty afternoon, the main road of Lystra is alive with ordinary noise, merchants shouting prices, children laughing in the dirt, neighbors haggling over figs and clay bowls. Just another day, until a traveler appears from the dusty path. He is breathless, dust clinging to his tunic, but his voice is loud and clear. Paul of Tarsus is returning to Lystra. The town freezes, heads turn, whispers ripple down the street. Some faces light up, some frown. Paul is not neutral here. Some remember when he healed a crippled man. Some remember when they tried to worship him like a god. Some remember when he was stoned outside these very gates. Eunice stands quietly in the crowd. Lois is beside her, watching and listening. Hope flickers behind Eunice's eyes. Concern flickers too. She knows what Paul carries. She knows his message is costly. Lois rests a gentle hand on Eunice's arm, a steadying touch, a reminder that God has already begun his work inside this home. Paul is coming back, and Timothy, the boy formed at a wooden table under lamplight, with scripture whispered into his soul, will soon meet the man who will call him son in the faith. The traveller points again toward the dusty road, and then the street slowly exhales. People return to selling. Children return to playing. Life continues, but with anticipation in the air. And this is how the kingdom often moves, quietly gaining ground before anyone realizes it. The revolution God planted in one kitchen is about to intersect with an apostle. The seed in Timothy is almost ready. The world sees only a dusty road, but heaven sees destiny approaching. And now, the courtyard in Lystra is overflowing. People pack in, sitting on stones, leaning against walls, finding any space possible to hear. Because Paul has arrived, and when Paul speaks, he doesn't sound like a philosopher of Greece. He doesn't sound like a politician of Rome. He speaks like a man who has died with Christ and lives again. Timothy sits right at the front, his eyes wide, his hands still, his heart burning. This is the voice he's been prepared for. Paul lifts a scroll, and every word is a sword of clarity. He tells them of the cross, of the risen Jesus, of grace that destroys religion and makes sons and daughters out of enemies. And Timothy feels something shift inside him. He sees the man who was stoned outside this city, and who walked back into this city anyway. He sees faith that does not retreat. Behind him, Eunice watches her boy, pride in her eyes, wonder in her heart. Beside her, Lois smiles, because she knows this is the moment. The seed has sprouted. The quiet revolution planted in kitchens, under lamplight, in hidden moments, is now connecting with apostolic fire. Paul will leave Lystra again. Rome will still be Rome. Philosophers will still debate. But Timothy, he will never be the same, because God takes the seeds planted by mothers and grandmothers and hands them to apostles to turn the world upside down. Later that evening in a quiet courtyard, Paul stands before Eunice. No crowd, no noise, only soft light through leaves and the distant sound of birds. Paul's voice is gentle, but his words are heavy. Let Timothy come with me. Eunice's hands tremble slightly. She looks at Paul, and suddenly her mind fills with memories. Timothy running in the fields, laughing like sunlight, his small fingers tracing the shape of a wooden toy. A younger version of herself, holding him in her lap, whispering scripture over his tiny life. And now, Paul wants to take him. Eunice lifts her eyes and sees no pressure in Paul's face, only invitation, only purpose, only destiny. She looks down at the stone bench, her fingers tracing the rough surface, and her heart breaks and opens at the same time. This is the moment every mother of faith faces, in her own way. There comes a point where the seed you carefully planted must leave your hand, if it's going to change the world. Eunice exhales, not because she is losing her son, but because she knows she is releasing him into the very purpose she prayed for. Paul steps back. He walks away slowly down the path, and Eunice sits alone in the courtyard, the quiet heavy and holy around her. This is the cost of the quiet revolution. You plant with tears so that others can harvest with joy, and Eunice, the unseen mother, now trusts God to finish what she began. Back in the kitchen, the room where it all began. The lamp flickers. The table is simple. The air is heavy with love and ache. Eunice stands in front of her son. The boy she taught letters to, the boy she prayed over, the boy she whispered Torah to. He holds a small travel bag now. His eyes, so like hers, are steady but uncertain. Eunice rests her hands on the table and then on his shoulders. She looks at him the way only a mother can, with pride and sorrow intertwined. She remembers when he could barely form words, and now his words will preach Christ. Lois sits nearby, her hands folded in her lap, watching the fulfillment of decades of faith. This is not a moment of loss. This is a moment of release. Eunice embraces him. She doesn't speak right away. She holds him like she's memorizing the shape of her own miracle. And then Lois rises. She places her hand on Timothy's shoulder. Her touch is a blessing. Her silence is a prayer. Timothy closes his eyes and receives, because he knows now he is not leaving home with nothing. He is leaving with everything that matters. He steps back toward the doorway. He looks at Eunice and Lois one more time. They stand together, two women who fought battles in prayer, who planted truth in secret, who never preached to crowds, and yet changed history by shaping one life. The doorframe glows with sunlight. Timothy steps into it. The kitchen stays behind. The kitchen that was a womb for a prophet. And when the room empties, the oil lamp still burns. Because the revolution that began in this home is now walking out into the world. This is the glory of quiet faith. You sow scripture in a child, and God carries it further than you could ever go. Eunice and Lois didn't write scripture, but the scripture they planted helped raise a man who would. Planting a quiet revolution. This is how God changes the world. Years later, a candle flickers over a parchment on a desk. To Timothy, Paul writes to the son of his heart. But listen now. Timothy's life tells the story. He stands in the marketplace, on stone platform, scroll in hand, preaching Christ with fire in his voice. Some believe, some argue, some just listen, hungry for hope. Timothy's hands shake slightly with the weight of the gospel, but he does not shrink back. He kneels in dim homes, praying over the sick with gentle hands. He lifts his scroll in the synagogue and teaches the word with reverence and warmth. This is the fruit of a woman's faith. This is the harvest of seeds, planted in a small kitchen. Timothy is who he is because Eunice believed faith at home is enough to change the world. She never preached to crowds, but her son does. She never wrote an epistle, but her son receives one. This is how God wins nations, through mothers, grandmothers, homes with oil lamps and worn scrolls. Eunice planted a quiet revolution. Timothy is living it out, and the story does not end in Lystra, because the quiet revolution Eunice began still moves through kitchens and homes today. A young mother spreads care onto slices of bread, her hands gentle, deliberate. Children laugh at the table, backpacks at their sides, ready for the world, ready to carry truth forward. In classrooms, teachers guide eager minds, hands pointing, words underlined, curiosity sparked. In cozy corners, grandfathers read stories aloud, their voices weaving wonder into young hearts. Hands tie shoelaces, hand out books, place comforting touches, small, unseen acts that shape character and faith. Communities gather outdoors, diverse and joyful, children running with kites, faces shining with freedom and hope. This is the rhythm of Eunice's revolution. Quiet, patient, steadfast. Faith planted in the heart of one child ripples outward, generation to generation, changing the world one home, one life, one act of love at a time. Faith begins quietly, like a candle's first glow. Eunice lit that light in her home, a small, steady flame of prayer, devotion, and scripture. Daily, she placed the bread before her child, not just to feed the body, but to teach gratitude and provision. She served others in simple ways, showing love in acts that seemed ordinary, yet carried extraordinary power. Her hands shaped the vessel of her household, turning daily tasks into tools of faith, reminding Timothy to use the gifts God had given him. She forgave freely, teaching that reconciliation is stronger than resentment, that the chains of the world cannot bind a heart that trusts God. She planted seeds of truth, one small moment at a time, nurturing faith in Timothy like a sprout breaking through rich soil. And she shared the good news, not with grand speeches, but with lived example. Words spoken at a table, hands folded in prayer, eyes lifted in trust. The candle burned still, surrounded by bread, by vessels, by open scrolls. This is the quiet revolution Eunice began. Faith lived, gifts used, love shared, one life raised to carry God's light into the world. A revolution that started in a humble kitchen and continues wherever hearts are willing to follow.
Help us share the gospel with the world. Subscribe to Charis Animation Studio and pass this on.